Hello and welcome to the Tulsa Times podcast. I'm Patrick McNicholas, the artist and researcher behind Time Travel Tulsa, and as always, I'm joined with local historian and friend John Beasley. In this show, we discuss Tulsa's past, present, and future, so sit back and relax as we talk Tulsa Times. Well, thanks for joining us, and welcome back to the 5th edition of the podcast. It's officially September, and you could say we kind of took a summer break since the last episode, but, you know, it really allowed us to make some improvements in both our sound equipment and the way that we plan to move forward producing future episodes. But we're so glad to be back and looking forward to sharing even more Tulsa Times content soon. And in this episode, we have a very special guest, one who will join us a little bit later, of course, Tulsa comedian and influencer, Evan Hughes, a.k.a. the King of Tulsa, and not to be confused with, of course, the most popular now, Tulsa King.
Aha, yes.
Careful how you Google search. But we'll discuss
the King of Tulsa.
We'll discuss the history of comedy and entertainment, because we're going to talk some music as well. And we're going to get introduced to the next generation of comedy in Oklahoma and beyond. But as always, we'll start with the most recent updates. And I want to start with a quick follow-up to our last episode with Jake, of course.
Jake Cornwell.
And I went to the Sandlot Showcase, which, again, he mentioned in the last episode. It was at Driller Stadium on Father's Day. One of those 100-plus degree summer days, kind of just like now, you know. And I debated on going, but, you know, long story short, thankfully I did. The Drillers paid first, and that was actually when it was hotter. But when that game ended, I was able to run out there and run the bases. But I filmed it on my phone as if I stormed the field. So
so it was from the first person. You were just had it out in front of you.
Yeah. So I have it shaky, like I'm running out there, and like you can see someone coming. Kind of. Yeah. Anyway,
it was an exciting win.
If you didn't see it, you missed it. But they played first, ran the bases. Rumblers, which is Jake's team, and again, that's S.E. Hinton's Rumbler. It's a reference to the Rumblers and the Outsiders. But they played the Jesters, which is another Tulsa team, and that was the closest I've ever been able to sit, too. Not only being out on the field, but that was the closest I was able to sit. But the promotional team eventually approached me, and that's when they said, you know, it's Father's Day. Are you a father?
Right.
And I was thinking for a second, I was like, I should have said yes.
You've got the dad bod. So maybe that's why they thought that.
Maybe. I don't know. But I told the truth and said no. And they kind of looked around, and I was kind of like, where I was sitting, I didn't have the close seats then, but where I was sitting, I was kind of on the edges, but I was still in the shade. But they were like, you know, come to the bottom of the dugout at whatever inning, and they were like, you're going to do the dizzy bat challenge.
Oh, that's a classic.
And let's just say I was already dizzy to begin with. But
it happens.
I got down there. The bat was a little bit longer than the two opponents.
Right, that's the controversy.
And but you're still looking at the winner here. And I can't even remember who it was, but I ran into somebody that was there that day, and they argued to my face that I didn't win. And it wasn't one of the guys I went against either, but I won a T-Town Clowns jersey, which Jake mentioned in the last episode. They didn't start wearing those until 2011, so that was really cool, especially coming right off the edge of that last episode. And Cody Bellinger bobblehead, so it was definitely well worth actually showing up for that game and much more.
Fantastic, good. Yeah, I've never had a bad time at One Oak Field, so yeah, always good. But it sounds like that was an exceptional day at the ball field, despite the 108-degree temperatures.
Well, I was there the other night, and it was much cooler, and I got a hat. They were giving out hats, and I wore the jersey. So
Yeah, we're about done. Go Drillers. We got to win these next 2 games. They did make the playoffs, but and both those games are here in Tulsa, right?
I know they played Wichita last night.
Yeah.
17-1.
Right.
Look away.
All right. Nope. Let's come home and get it done.
Speaking of the jersey, it's not a jersey, but it's a T-shirt that I had made, and it's the Time Travel Tulsa T-shirt, which is still available on my website, tulsapass.com, in large and XL sizes. John was one of the early ones to get his, and
love wearing it around town. I wore it to a Tulsa Foundation for Architecture tour, and I talked to a lot of people about it, and it's nice to be appreciated, and you do good work. Everybody appreciates your photography.
My dad got one, and I have not seen him without it since. I mean, every time I see him, he's wearing it. So.
I have seen him in that shirt, yes.
And we went to the concert, the Killer Queen tribute, and somebody asked him what year he was in, because I guess time travel, and he thought he meant, like, what year did he graduate high school or something.
Okay. So what year was he?
Well, he was born in 55, but...
So graduated high school. I would be in 1988. So
yeah. We'll do the math later, but he'll appreciate that too. And,
shout out to Dad. Yep.
But of course, this is an extension of the Time Travel Tulsa project. So it's not just about me. It's more about what has happened and occurred in Tulsa, but also with some of the projects that I've been working on. And I wanted to mention just a few things real quick. And of course, people that follow me have seen these posts, but I've had a lot more time to work on these posts and also create reels that show some kind of the editing, which is kind of meditative and kind of, calming process to certain people, but Indeed. A lot of people have liked it. But one of those buildings was one that, second in Detroit, and it's kind of, the way that I see it, is kind of our own automobile alley. Even though it's the Blue Dome district, it's really a contributing member of the historic district.
Yes,
Blue
and
Dome.
2nd Street was Route 66, in its first alignment, 24 to 36, something like that?
26 to 32.
There you go, that's what I meant.
But the automobile activity wasn't even mentioned in the National Register. And that's what kind of threw me out. And I mean, some of the National Register, if you get some of the older ones, sometimes there is limited information. But some of the newer ones, which again, this was added much later, but some of the newer ones you'll find a lot more in-depth information. But, this information is not in the typical locations. Newspapers.com has been such a great investment, and it's been able to resource. Find multiple advertisements because this originally was a lumber yard turned wagon yard.
So just so Tolsons know, we're talking about the building that's now Yokozuna, and then it goes down to Peacemaker Lobster is what's on the end now.
Yeah, and people remember it as Blue Dome Diner, or it was a theater even for a little while, and then I guess Hertz Donuts is kind of the touristy location. So just just south of Hertz Donuts, there's that building, and you can kind of see that commercial style architecture.
Yeah, and that's that prairie style with the those stone embellishments that are embedded within the mason work. So then the brick was built around it. It was very intentionally and very well designed, and I think often overlooked when we look at the interesting buildings of Tulsa. So I was glad to see you focus on that one as well.
Yeah, when you sent me that information, that was kind of what it really said, was just that. But when I was able to look at some of these advertisements, there were multiple car companies that I've never heard of, and I don't really consider myself a car guru or anything. But one of the interesting things that I found was one of the more successful makers of electric cars, a brand named Milburn, had a sales room and service station. When we say service station, that means just like we think of it today. They had batteries where you could buy and batteries placed where you could recharge electric vehicles. But this was literally on that corner where Yokozuna is. and they sold what were called at the time light electric vehicles, and they traveled about 60 miles on a single charge and had a top speed about 19 to 23 miles per hour. And what was interesting when I was researching this, a video on YouTube, this was for an auction, and they went around to the back. They showed how it all worked, which was two different handles.
Okay.
But when they went around to the back, and they were like, yeah, this was from Oklahoma, and there's an Oklahoma license plate on it.
Yes.
And so I was like, man, I wonder what the connection was there. But the video was pretty old, I think 2012 or somewhere in there. But anyway, the building has over a decade of automobile history, really not mentioned elsewhere, and I hope to maybe be able to go in depth on that someday. But I just keep finding, unique historical information with the newspapers.com, and I helped with the mine research, which we did in our episode 2 of the podcast, and a lot of our my Tulsa People work. But again, you can find the podcast anywhere now. Just look up Tulsa Times podcast. But we'll save more history for later. I did want to mention, and this kind of goes into what John's worked on, but the council oak tree, it got a lot of shares and attention, a post that I made, and it was a reel kind of showing that editing process. But really, I only scratched the surface visually because I really just had the tree. Beside that, there's the stickball field and a park, and that's really where Tulsa was.
It was. And, that is just a small portion because it ran all the way along that ridge that we, know as Crybaby Hill these days. So where the council oak tree, when the Lochapoka came through, when they ended the Trail of Tears basically here in Tulsa, that was like the south end of the Lochapoka settlement. So, you go all the way down to like McBurney Mansion, McBurney Springs. That McBurney Mansion or the McBurney Springs was mentioned by Washington Irving when he came through in 1832 or so. So,
36.
Okay. So that was like that was like the first documented account of, the Riverview neighborhood, because that McBurney Springs is specifically mentioned. And I've really come to appreciate that older history because we think of Tulsa as being a relatively young city, being, founded in the 1880s, but really the history of the area and settlement of the area, and even what became the city of Tulsa, dates back to the 1830s.
Well, and thinking of, that tree was almost cut down in, what was it, the 80s?
There were a couple of times that, yes, it was in danger of being removed because it's a great, real estate there. But fortunately, the citizens of Tulsa wouldn't allow it and now has a protected status.
But yeah, a few blocks from there was the Tulsa People's Orchestra on July 1st, where I sold 2 different prints, one of the Spotlight. Percentage was donated back to them, but that was there at the Yard Bar, and they played Jurassic Park theme song even, I remember. We were there for that.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that was a great event.
And then even a little bit further down on Riverside, the great show at Shades of Brown on Brookside during the month of August, multiple pieces and some new lenticulars that I made. And the lenticular world has gone crazy right now. Big supply issue. This company that I used to use mainly went to medical plastics instead of lenses, and lenticulars are definitely not anything new, but although they're still new to some people. But I am trying to figure out how to deal with this issue and hopefully be able to get more lenticulars out there to new people, because the lenticular photo cube that I made,
that thing is amazing.
Just kind of came to me out of nowhere. And again, this is another reel that's on my page. It's not a editing so much of it is more of the cube itself and the different perspectives that you get on it. But that was going to be in the exhibit at Shades of Brown, but it just didn't really have a place for it, that no one would just take it with them, But
right.
I still have work on display at Philbrook, which that exhibit has continued on, and the Tulsa Historical Society, where I gave a speech just recently to a group of new Tolsons, kind of introducing my work, and also introducing them to kind of Tulsa history as well. But when we talk time-based photography, I had some time slice prints that are available at the Spotlight, and what that is basically a time lapse that I did through the historic window there of 16 different layers of a sunset. And you had a handful of them there.
Yeah. And we have sold most. I think I have a couple left. So we may be ordering some others. But yeah, I just love that shot. Everybody loves the shot. That round window is truly iconic. And, you and I were there, and, you just get lucky sometimes. And we had an absolutely glorious sunset. So, yeah, you can purchase that at the Spotlight Theater. Do you have a page where you can buy them online?
Actually, no, these would be by special order, so you can reach out to me. But there's been a lot happening at the Spotlight. What else has been going on there? Because we got Golf Fest coming up in December.
Right. So, yeah, we've got a lot going on in Riverview, that's for sure. Greek Fest is also this weekend. So, and then, in December, we're looking forward to Golf Fest and once again highlighting our Bruce Goff design iconic masterpiece, the 1928 Spotlight Theater. So, as I've kind of already mentioned, I've been spending a lot of time at the Spotlight recently because I am the president of the board of directors, and we recently lost our theater manager. Jer Ungerfer had worked at the Spotlight Theater for 65 years. So he started in 1957, 12 years old, started working, pulling the ropes to work backstage, and worked his way up to the theater manager. And he was at work on a Wednesday and died Thursday morning, so it was kind of unexpected. We'd, assumed he would always be there because he was literally always there.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, because anytime I was there, you took it for granted he was going to be there. Right. Doing something.
He, like I said, he'd been there since 1957. He was never married, no children. This theater was his life, so he is dearly missed in many, many ways. But we're trying to remain positive. The show must go on. We're learning that we have a lot to learn to keep this theater together, and it's going to take probably 3 people to replace one Jer.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say other than, definitely there's been a lot of posts in his honor on Facebook, people that he influenced. He touched
so many lives. And yes, everybody. Tolsons, if you've been to the Drunkard, you remember the show. Fantastic. You need to come on back and see us. If you haven't been, come see us. But yeah, those of you that have been there anytime since 1957, that all happened because of this one single person, Jer Ungerfer.
We'll talk a little bit more about some other developments that has happened in Tulsa. Guthrie Green has been having a lot of events for them turning 10 years old, and what we've talked about in the past was what used to be a trucking parking lot, and now it's a hydroelectric power station.
That's one of those things that's so interesting, when we give the tours and people ask, well, what used to be here? You would really have to dig deep to find anything beyond a truck or train yard. You and I have looked at the old maps, and that's where the Church of the Holy Rollers was back in 19-whatever. But other than that, it's been largely nothing. And for 10 years now, it's their 10th anniversary or 10th birthday is what they're celebrating. 10 years of the Guthrie Green. And it has been a great month. A lot of my live music, just a lot going on. This week, they are hosting The Moth, the radio hour. They'll be in town all weekend. They've got their Story Slam that they'll be recording for airing on NPR. The Gathering Place is celebrating its 4th birthday this month as well.
And we have some things that are kind of trying to have a birthday. The WPX building, which is nearing completion, along with the Santa Fe Square, the infamous Davenport Lofts across from OK Pop, Green Arch, and others. But I was thinking about this, and I was thinking 1922 and 2022 as far as developments that are happening downtown. And, it kind of like we're almost seeing what what it looked like in a sense. I mean, with
There are
the
some
amount of
dramatic
development.
changes. Yes, indeed.
What was interesting, Channel 6, who I've been freelancing again with, WPX Energy Building has thousands of bricks from the old spaghetti warehouse
Right, the
that
Griffin,
make up certain parts of the building, and they showed that on a video, and it was really interesting. But one of the other things that was a video that kind of went viral, Tony Russell, a good friend of mine, he showed the QT Eatery that's opened in the BOK Tower, and you said
Yes. Wow, that's really weird. So it's open 24 hours, and if you're in the building, you can go in there, but there are no attendants. And so once you walk it, it's just really weird. You grab what you want, and then you leave. So I'm unsure of how all this works, right? So I'm sitting there updating my BOK account online, and sure enough, it charged me for a Coca-Cola. But yeah, there's no paying for anything. There doesn't even have to be an attendant there. You walk in the door, you get what you need, you walk out, and it charges your account.
Well, I mean, it didn't make as big news on local media, but social media it really blew up. But the things that did make the news this week were obviously the hot temperatures, but the Zinc Lake Dam and pedestrian bridge updates. The mayor had posted an aerial view showing kind of what was possible with that.
That is so
And construction
cool.
soon to be complete sometime within the next year.
Yes.
But water sports, recreation activities, and also mitigate flood risk. But the total range is actually going to be from where you're at, a gathering place, all the way down to 244 Bridge.
Right.
Total
Yes.
about a little over 2 miles.
Right by the apartment. Riverview.
And people, have been upset about how long this has taken, but if we look at some of the Keystone Dam, which the mayor mentioned, that was our last biggest thing. That took 8 years total versus the 3 years that we're doing for an entire dam replacement in the Arkansas River, which is a huge river too, by the way.
We have had a lot going on recently, and people are getting back to the old, well, where's the water? Because they have been holding water back at Keystone. Mm-hmm. But if you think about the past couple of years, that wastewater treatment plant totally redid their discharge outlet into the Arkansas. That Gilcrease extension, so we've got a new bridge going over the Arkansas River that connects the Charles Page neighborhood to Berry Hill. That's done. They've really made great progress, and I know the projected date is summer of 2023, but if they continue to have the good weather that they have, and as long as the folks from Army Corps of Engineers is holding back the water there at Keystone, the new low water dam that will make Zinc Lake, the new pedestrian bridge, and the new kayak course, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, I hope that they will all be done and ready for springtime.
And the Greenwood Rising Museum, they were going under some renovations, but now available, one of 88 institutions that are on the Bloomberg Connects app. And I'm happy to say that my artwork is some of the artwork that's featured on that app. And the app is basically kind of a museum database, and you can go on there and view these museums as if you're there in person. And about 85% of the content that's inside the museum is available on the app, and that other percentage of content is basically the stuff of mine and some other stuff as well. But you can access this through any of the app stores. Just download Bloomberg Connects and go to Greenwood Rising. And like I said, many ongoing exhibits that are both in person and on the app only. But I have 30 images. Some of those have never been released anywhere else, which I'm very proud of. Close to 5,000 words in total that I wrote, kind of explaining and giving context to each one of those photos. There's also a short video kind of describing my process and some biography information. Be sure to check that out after listening to this episode. It's available now worldwide, and the app, again, is well-designed, easy to navigate. You can learn about Tulsa history anywhere on the planet. And it's football season now, of course, but in March we'll have arena football back at the BOK. First time since 2014, the Talons. And the team name, get ready for this, the Oilers, which may sound familiar because that's the hockey team name as well. But despite people's dislike, this won't be the first time that we've had two Oilers teams at the same time. In fact, the baseball team was named that until the late 70s before the Drillers name, and then the hockey team has been named that since 1928, kind of off and on. And so now we have the football team, which is Indoor Football League, which was created in 2008. Largest number of active teams, and also 16th team to be added is Tulsa. And there's 13 different states, the closest being Texas and New Mexico. And like I mentioned, it's been a hot September, including a 100-degree day yesterday and today. Today we actually broke the 98-degree record that was from 1980. And those are Travis Meyer numbers, because I've been, again, freelancing at Channel 6, and we got to talk a little bit of weather, so I wanted to incorporate that, the record-breaking day. But also tomorrow is fall, so fall starts tomorrow, and we're supposed to be having a cool front coming in later tonight. But hopefully we get those great temperatures for the state fair that's coming up at the end of this month. Pro tip here, they got a huge line of local wine producers that you can try. But we're looking forward to this year as well. And it's official. We're announcing the guest and topic for next episode. Local musician J.W. Francis, who will be performing at the Bob Dylan Center next month. And we plan to take Tulsa history and talk music history with him in his recent endeavors, including playing overseas as well as completing the entirety of the Appalachian Trail. So that's going to be interesting to talk to him. Of course, there's so much more that has happened since the last episode, and we can't mention everything, but we want to introduce our main guest here, and he is also known as the King of Tulsa, but not to be confused, again, with the Tulsa King, but comedy and influencer Evan Hughes, and also revolutionary when it comes to dancing and dance moves. But please welcome in the King of Tulsa, Evan Hughes.
Hey, thank you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes,
and
welcome.
being a part of this is actually the 5th episode of our podcast and our 3rd guest. So we're glad to have, again, the King of Tulsa. Where does that name come from?
Okay, so I think it's kind of funny because I think people initially, we're going back like 7 years when I was new to comedy, started calling me the sweetheart of Tulsa. And then it went to the Prince of Tulsa.
Okay.
And then it moved up to the King of Tulsa. So I think, and I didn't change any of the branding. It was like Tolsons did that. They were like updating it for me. It's like I'd been the other one too long, so they had to move me up.
And how long would you say that took over time?
I think the King of Tulsa thing has only been going on for, well, that's not true. I think it's funny because a few people will say it, but not everyone will say it. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, like, everyone is saying it, and that's been like 2 years, I think, ish. Maybe longer. It's hard to, but I don't think it wasn't like 5 years ago.
Yeah, you know? Well, I was I was doing research on you, and obviously I pulled up some older articles, but when I typed in King of Tulsa, I obviously ran into a lot of Sylvester Stallone promotion and so on and so forth.
I definitely had it before that series.
But now you can't leave. You got to stay here in Tulsa, or is it?
I plan to. I own my house, and yeah,
okay.
I don't ever
Did
plan
you go
on
to
leaving.
you went to school here in Tulsa? Or college or anything like that? Or?
Yeah, I think that's why I'm such a Tulsa person, because I've never lived anywhere else. And all of my friends that have lived, on the East Coast or the West Coast or wherever they've lived out overseas, they've taken some of that into their personality. And, they're some of that is part of who they are now. Mm-hmm. And it's like me, I am just 100%. I have no outside influences. I'm like just the most Tulsa. I've been here.
Yeah.
I'm still here.
And that's kind of, we're going to talk about that Tulsa influence a little bit later. most people know you from your social media presence, but many have also seen the T-shirt with the Instagram feed full of likes and have been probably a little confused. Where did that T-shirt come, or where did the idea come about of giving multiple likes? Because I mean, anybody can do it.
Well, what's crazy is I actually have like 6 T-shirts.
Okay.
And there's probably like there's at least like 4 other ones that it's not just me, but like I'm on the T-shirt,
okay.
Along with other people. But my first T-shirt came out in 2016 and was I sold, I don't know what I'm saying, like 300 of them roughly. And then I've been asked to redo it so many times and just like make more of that original shirt, but I just haven't yet. But I've been thinking next year I'm going to record my first comedy special in town. And I'm thinking of having a limited number of like the original shirt made again for that show. But to answer your question about like the Evan Hughes liked your post T-shirt, I had my friend Clayton. He just pulled up to one of the comedy shows one night and surprised me with it. He was like, check this out. And he just pulled it out and he had it made. And I was like, holy shit. It's so smart. I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it. And I thought it was the only one. And he was like, no, I did, 50 to start, and I'm going to post it. And I told him I wanted him to keep all the money from it. Like I haven't gotten anything from that shirt. And that was me not wanting to take anything from it. Like, so I like the idea of like, hey, it was your idea, you came up with it, you went to the trouble of getting it put out and stuff, and it was really like a great honor too, and it's so cool that I just wanted him to. So anybody that's messaged me about it, and it's been tons of people, I've always sent them directly to him. I'm like, you got to go to my friend, you got to go to my friend.
And I would say it's not in the dictionary yet, but getting Evan Hughes is kind of the verb, and it's now celebrated. And I was going to ask, why hasn't it happened to me? But yesterday, around 1:35, that all changed. And I
Reese
joined,
got his yesterday too.
There were a few people, I think, that joined that elite group yesterday.
There you go, Reese Martin,
and it's
our
an interesting
3
marketing.
guest.
Yeah, it's Reese was one of those, but it's an interesting marketing technique because again, anyone could do this, but. I think the question is still, why is it cool when you do it, but it's creepy? Like if I were to do it, that would be kind of an unusual part.
Well, it's funny, I think, because it's been going on for 4 or 5 years now, and I've been liking stuff, like tons of stuff, pretty much the entire time I've had social media, outside of the first 3 months. Like once I got comfortable with this is what it is, and there's a like button, I just started just on it the same way I am now. But it took a while before it became a thing that people were talking about and recognizing. Like I would be asked about it more in person, and every once in a while someone would make a post about it, but it wasn't like everyone was posting about it. And then 4 years ago or so, I think I don't even know who the first person was at this point that did it, but someone posted it and their caption was hilarious, and it started getting shared and it had so many likes. And I was just like, man, I think this is a thing, Yeah. And then other people were posting it. And then pretty much since then, I mean, on some platform, it's been done on Twitter many times. It's been done on Instagram tons of times, Facebook tons and tons of times. So it's always been going on one of the platforms this entire time. I mean, when there was nothing to do during the pandemic, there were days where I just spent just liking stuff,
Well, yeah, definitely during the pandemic, we had plenty of times doing social media and stuff. But your social media is very kind of against what you would think would be typical. You don't post extremely often, or you don't have tons of posts. But I think one of the introductions for me, I knew of you and everything, but the headphones over at Whittier Bar, the video with 9 Inch Nails.
Oh yeah,
that one kind of made. That one was just instant. Everyone was sharing it, and I mean, if you've seen it once, it's either your sense of humor or not. But you weren't listening to 9 Inch Nails. You were actually listening to something else at the time, right?
Yeah. I think it was just I think it was a rap song or something like that. My friend Landry Miller made that. And I've had a lot of great, I guess I'll call it content, like that made for me and about me, over the years. And that one, I loved it, and I put it out, which I think surprised everyone because I just don't usually put stuff out. Like my friend Casey was like, she said she was working at Whittier Bar as a bartender, and they were having a work meeting the day after the video originally dropped. And she was scrolling, and I had actually posted it myself on Instagram. And she said she just like screamed in the bar. She's like, "He posted it," like everybody was like.
And Tony's in that
Tony's
video.
in it
I mean,
too.
he's a big athletic fan, Tulsa Athletic, and I am as well. Soccer. I did some camera work for them, but it was good to see him in there because he's kind of feeling it too. I mean, it's kind of like both of you guys, but then the Zoom, of course, the Zoom really does it. But I mean, I think everything does it. The synchronization with the music. I mean, who chose that song? Was that you that chose that?
No, the entire piece of content, we'll call it, was put out by Landry. I think a friend helped him with it, but they had dropped it. I believe it was on Twitter, and it just got so many retweets on Twitter, and like everybody that saw it liked it. So it was one of those things that was kind of a no-brainer. But I've had hits like that, throughout the years that I just kind of not ignored it, but I didn't put it back out myself, like on my Instagram, like that have been, successful on other platforms. And that one, I was just like, there's so much to like about it. I'm wearing, the A Fist to Face T-shirt, which is, Tony's sister, and Tony's in it, and Tony's so great in it, and it's the Whittier Bar. It's just so, it works on so many levels. It's Nine Inch Nails, it's Tulsa, it's like that one. It's weird. I don't know. It just like light bulb went off over my head where I was just like, it's so good. You can't.
And
if anyone
hasn't seen it, it's pretty close to his top of his Instagram feed. I think it's up there. But
someone else. Oh, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to get this in. But someone else did it later, much later on TikTok, and it was like viral. But it's not as good. Yeah. It's really not.
Yeah.
It's just like it was like they like the idea of it, but it doesn't have the facial expressions and stuff. It's not. Yeah.
It almost could be, and I do this with a friend of ours. He videotaped himself listening to a song, and I put a different song on it each time and then upload it. So, you could almost do that. You could put a different song on it and create a profile in itself. But, that's social media for you. There's a lot of different opportunities. What platform do you say that you use probably the most? Or what works the best for the local scene and getting people to come out to shows and stuff like that?
Well, they all kind of have different positives and negatives, I guess, all of them. It seems that more Tolsons are on Facebook than anything else. It seems like.
Yeah.
That's how it seems. But that's not to say that it's the most fun platform necessarily. It seems to have the most reach around town. Instagram, is I feel like it's been better over the years. It's, some of the platforms seem to have kind of fallen off a little bit. Yeah. Twitter is really good for small groups of friends. It's much smaller. Like Tulsa Twitter is by far the smallest of Instagram and Facebook, but you actually can really get a lot of, you can really reach people there, and actually there's been times where like if a flyer makes its rounds on Twitter, a lot of those people will actually come to the show. Like you'll see like 30 people will be there just from Twitter, and
yeah,
so it really does work to get people together. So we have an art night that we do every Monday. I don't know, this probably isn't anything that you
No, we definitely want to hear more about any upcoming events, or at least the listeners can check out what's going on in Tulsa.
So I've got my friend JB, he started an art night in, I think, very late October of last year, and it started off with, I think he had like 5 people the first time he announced it, and it regularly gets, 45 or so people now or more, and it's just like it's got a live jam. All the art supplies are provided. Different people come every week. He's got a pool there. It's over the summer, like the pool was open, and people are just painting and drawing, and so many Tulsa, scenester people have come through and been a part of it, and you just come in and you can smoke weed in the house. I don't know if I should say that on here, but I'm kind of I'm snitching right now.
We're not doing that right now, but yeah, we would like to do that in the future.
Everybody has their cars.
Here in about 20 minutes, we'll talk more about that.
But the fire marshal checked it out. Everybody has their med cards.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing that we do every Monday. I've been going since November of last year, and and Twitter is a large part of the marketing of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say just my own personal experience. Instagram's kind of more like time based, like you're more successful at certain times of the day. But we'll get back on topic. How long have you been doing comedy in Tulsa? Because I mean, it wasn't like you grew up and this was what you wanted to be.
Yeah, my first set was in March of 2015.
For our listeners who really don't know you at all, I mean, what was that evolution, and how did it really get started?
It was just kind of I got into a phase of my life where I was just saying yes to everything, and I got lucky enough to meet a girl whose sister was a local comic and a very prominent one. So I got invited to come out to the Looney Bin to watch her perform, and that was my introduction into local comedy. Not even knowing that comedy was happening in Tulsa, which I think it's fair to say that there are tons and tons and tons of people compared to now in Tulsa did not know Tulsa had a comedy scene at that time. And pretty much everybody, whether or not they've ever been to a show, they have an awareness that we are here because of the push that we've made over the last years.
Well, yeah, and that's what, I listened to one of your past podcasts, and you said that you had to say yes to every adventure, and I really found that interesting because I basically do the same thing. I mean, if I would have said no to a handful of things, I mean, I wouldn't have had the experience otherwise, and I didn't have to pay for that experience. It was just something that happened at the time. But when you first started telling jokes, I mean, was it like you had hoped? Or, I mean, I know that doing something for the first time, especially getting in front of a group of people, was that what you had expected? Did everything land, like the jokes and stuff like that? I mean, were you a natural or?
Kind of yes and no. I signed up for the comedy class at the Looney Bin, and I think it's fair to say I was the worst one in the class. Okay. I had really no idea about what I was doing and didn't really I wasn't even really trying to understand or trying to be good because I didn't really want to be in it. I didn't really understand what the class was when I signed up. I just thought maybe you kind of just hang out and, learn about comedy. It's like, you hear about a class to do anything. You don't necessarily think you're going to be doing anything. Mm-hmm. You might just be learning about it,
right.
Which I was like, yeah, I'll just sign up to this class and be in there. And on the first day, the comic, Roy Johnson, that was the class teacher, he was like, hey, at the end of this, everybody better pay attention to me because we do a class show. We do a graduation show where you guys all perform, and it usually sells out. And I was like, what? It usually sells out. I was like, so I just agreed. I signed up to perform in front of over 200 people, not realizing that, I didn't realize that. And then that made me just, want to not be there. I wanted to try to get out of it, but there was no real way to get out of it because I'd made an agreement with my friend.
You got to say yes to everything.
You got it. You're in it. I mean, it really would have been fucked up because I got her to agree to do it with me, and then if I had just bailed on it, she's stuck in there, by herself. When I told her I would do it with her.
Yes.
And so I ended up doing that, and when it got closer to showtime, Roy really got on my ass and really made sure that he got the most out of me.
Where's he now? Is he still
he moved to Florida.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He still does comedy teaching, or?
I don't know that he does. He was doing it, years after I'd already been out. He would bring me back to the class sometimes to just be like, hey, here's a success story, an example of someone who was in my class that didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And he would tell him that too. He'd be like, he didn't know what the fuck he was doing.
Right.
And then I showed him.
I think that's inspirational for a lot of people, especially coming out of the pandemic when things are more wide open and you can go and hang out with more people and really just put your foot into any door, and that has also allowed you to get to know more people, but also probably helpful in scheduling events. Because, I mean, you have events, multiple times a week. I
Yep.
mean, we were wanting to do this podcast, but I was thinking he may have something come up last minute or something. But how big is, I mean, because you mentioned in another podcast that, you had over 100 comedians in Tulsa, but how big is that inner circle now, or how big is kind of the comedic circle, I guess, in Tulsa now?
I feel like we've always got over 100 pretty much. It's like there's always some that are dropping out and always some that are just getting in. So it's just there's turnover, but it's just like the same at a company basically.
And I mean, these are all age groups too. I mean, you have teenagers all the way to older as John here.
Michael Patton is the one that comes to mind for me. I knew
Patton's
Michael
one of my favorite
many
people
years
for
ago.
sure.
We were doing environmental activism work together, and it's so interesting to see how our paths have both diverged and then come back together in many ways. But yeah, to be doing something totally different, and yeah, I admire those that can jump in at any age, especially just big fan of Michael Patton.
Well, Michael, I am too. I'm a big fan of Michael Patton. He's a really good example for comedy. I was talking about this with my friend Roman the other day about how so many people try comedy for the first time and kind of immediately quit, or they try it,
Sure.
2 or 3 times, and they kind of find out they don't like the way that the audiences take them. It's like in their head before they start, it's like, I'm going to talk about this shit, and I'm going to hit them with this,
Right.
this, and they're just going to be rolling. And then when it's that quiet, they're like, oh, well, they don't like the way I'm presenting, the way I present myself to people. It might not even just be completely the jokes. Sometimes it's like you get up there and you're just too aggressive, and the crowd just decides pretty quick whether they like you or not.
Right.
Which I've always heard, that audiences will decide within like the first, 10 or 15 seconds whether or not they like you.
I can see that.
Which is
Sure.
crazy.
Yeah.
But Michael Patton is a good example, I think, because he started in 2018 or 19?
Recently.
19.
Recently.
Yeah, something like that. And I feel like I got to watch his evolution and watch him
Right.
get a lot better. Like when he first showed up, I feel like, I'm not taking anything away from him. I think he didn't fully get it when he first started. Like nobody really
How
does.
could you?
just
Exactly.
get up. Yeah, you
Without
get up there
having
and you're
that
like,
prior experience.
yeah, you're like, I'm just going to get up there and tell some stories. Or let me
Sure.
see how this works. And,
Yes.
But he didn't quit. And I think he kind of figured out more like how audiences perceive him and like what his character is, like what works and what doesn't. And
Yes.
he's like, this is who audiences think I am.
Right.
And this is what I can give them of me that they're going to like. And I think some people just don't make that transition because they don't ever get to that part.
And I think, just knowing him, and I haven't seen a whole lot of his sets, but, he's kind of like a naturally funny guy. And I think a lot of people that want to be comedians, think that they're funny around their friends or something, and that equates to a stage presence, but it's not always like that, correct? I
Yeah,
mean,
because you have to figure out how to package it.
Yeah.
It's like the way you give it to him. It's like, Michael's always been funny, but it's like, how am I gonna show them like the best version of me?
Yes.
How am I? Yeah, and I think I watched him. I feel like in real time, like figure that out more and more. And now I could absolutely trust Michael to put him on any show in front of any type of audience, and he knows what to sell them. He knows what his pitch is.
Right.
Compared to when he first started, it's like starting out selling vacuum cleaners. It's like you show up with the vacuum cleaner, but you don't know what to tell them about it. And like Michael at this point,
Yeah,
it's like,
interesting.
It's like you're gonna buy that vacuum.
Right.
If Michael shows up at
Indeed.
your house with the vacuum.
he's an interesting guy, and for better or for worse, he taught me how to bet at the racetrack.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I've been there a few times. I didn't mention that in this because I haven't won much. But Evan, you obviously have other interests than comedy. What other hobbies do you say that you enjoy? Because, I mean, obviously you have you get out pretty frequently for the evenings. I mean, you're not always the one telling the jokes, but maybe programming it or...
I've always been big into music. I mean, even before comedy, music was my main interest. And I never played never in a band. I don't play any instruments, but like record collecting and things like that, and just being like a super fan of tons of different genres of music. So I actually know quite a bit about metal and punk and rap and all sorts of stuff.
Well,
A true Renaissance man.
Yeah.
we're gonna get into
Quiz
that
me.
a little bit more, of course. But I also have some other questions. But we're gonna talk how you got involved with the Fire in Little Africa music video. But in the meantime, let's look back at comedy history, because of course this is a history podcast, and it's important to mention the eclectic combination of comedians who not only made their mark from Tulsa, but many really blazing kind of their own trail, you know. So this is kind of a look back at the Hall of Fame of Tulsa comedians, but also how Tulsa has influenced them as well. And let's go back as far as 1950s, and we'll talk a little bit about the Spotlight again.
Ah, yes.
Which is the oldest running comedy in America.
It is. It's since November of 1953. Every Saturday, minus a few. There were some pandemic-related cancellations, if you will. Postpone is the word that we prefer to use. We don't cancel shows.
And what's the name of the play?
It is The Drunkard. It's a melodrama that we've really taken and exaggerated it even more. Again, anybody who's been there, they'll tell you about it. It's a Saturday night that you won't forget, that's for sure. But what are we, 68, 69 years running now?
And you can throw tomatoes at the villain.
Indeed.
That's what I always tell people, and they're
Yes.
kind of like, whoa.
Right.
But they're sewn
Boo
tomatoes.
and hiss. It is, yeah.
But in the
it
past,
is.
they were real tomatoes, right?
That's news to me.
Okay.
This is how urban legends are born. The myth of the tomatoes.
We've done
at
plenty
the
of those
Spotlight
in the past,
Theater.
yeah. Well, we'll move on. I mean, Gaylord Sartain moving on in future, and Gary Busey, of course, who are of KOTV fame, and they basically let him have the studio on Saturday night or on evening nights for Mazappa. And, people told me about that when I first
Interesting.
started working at Channel 6, which
Yes.
also was back in 2015. They moved buildings in 2013,
Right.
but they still have all the, so much content that was just kind of like, what, WTF? A
Yes.
lot of people didn't understand it, but Sartain even went on to go to Hee Haw fame.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And, Gary Busey, of course.
Gary Busey is Gary Busey. He's Gary Busey.
It's just not the type of comedy that most people, especially the younger generation, can really connect with. But that's different for people like Sam Kinison, who was a Pentecostal preacher.
He was.
Turned screaming entertainer, I guess you could say. But Sam Kinison's dad's church is right down from our old work. We still volunteer there from time to time at the Outsider's House.
Yeah, they're the
And
Crutchfield neighborhood.
The church is still there.
It is. So, as you drive north on Utica, what is that, towards Pine?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a dilapidated old church there on the west side. It's going to fall down any minute now. But that was the church that... Sam Kinison's stepfather was the lead pastor, I believe. But Sam Kinison preached there as well. And it's really interesting because you can go online and you can find that last sermon. So he had already moved to California and was actually working as a security guard for comedy shows in Los Angeles and trying to break into the business. Came back for Thanksgiving. 1982, and his last sermon was actually recorded, and you can find it online. And it is interesting. I would say it's even haunting in a way, because of course we know how the story played out after. Yeah. And unlike you younger kids here, I remember Sam in his prime, and how that transition in 1982 when he found fame and lost his religion.
Well, I think, once like YouTube really came around, like that was one of the ones that people like would always be like, because it was comedy that was so different than, someone literally screaming at the top of their lungs. He was on the late night shows, and you can find those, and Rodney Dangerfield was kind of like his, someone that he looked up to, but he was also a guest at SNL, and unfortunately lost his life to a drunk driver.
A tragic story. Yes, he had himself become clean. He was sober. And, then to be killed by an underaged, drunken driver. And he's buried right here in Tulsa. But yeah, very, very sad.
On a completely different level, it's kind of weird to switch gears that quickly, but growing up, I know that I remember the voice of Roy D. Mercer and the KMO
right.
DJ. I think that was probably when we think of Tulsa, we don't immediately think of them, but I mean, as far as history goes, they were here, and they had 12 studio albums from 96 to 2013.
Oh, yeah. I had a few on cassette tape.
And I would say, that goes back to what we were talking about YouTube in the early days. Like, I mean, so many prank YouTube comedians came out, but it was kind of video instead of just calling someone. Mm-hmm. But it also was kind of like pre-internet, so they were going viral before, it was really had that platform. So I kind of think, they kind of have like an influence, or I can kind of see, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes a lot, And
it is unique Tulsa comedy history, no doubt.
And then, of course, fun fact: we record this across from Bill Hader's old workplace, the Borders Bookstore, and he's known for his impressions, and he kind of catapulted to success as a cast member of SNL in 2005. You guys don't remember him at all? I mean, no one got a chance to meet him, or you did, or
no? Just his dad.
His dad,
Sure.
A lot of people knew of his dad and whatnot. I would have to say that Hader is literally one of my favorites because I'm a huge documentary person, and he did the documentary Now, which is on IFC, new season next month, and it's amazing. He makes fun of old documentaries. It's kind of like Spinal Tap on the next level,
Okay.
So each episode is a different documentary they make fun of. That's a historic documentary, but they do it in acting. And but anyway, the other big series that we cannot forget to mention is Reservation Dogs, and we all know people involved in that production.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask Evan about this, the unusual comedy that was also filmed here. Are you a UHF fan?
Yeah, the Weird Al movie. Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
So I did.
What do we need to do to get him back to town? He needs to come visit.
He comes here quite a bit.
Okay.
Well, he goes to Claremore. Last time he was in Claremore, and he stopped but he's also got a new movie, which initially, I want to correct myself, I thought it was the trailer, I thought it was not going to be good, but it turns out it was actually a play on biopics, so it's not even meant to be a true
trailer.
Story. It's really more of a joke. And,
yes.
And I mean, who would do it better than him, of course, but I wanted to say that I recreated some of those photos from... what was it? The Gandhi 2.
Yes.
From
yes,
downtown.
In the alley. They're at 4th and Main.
But he's got a new movie that's coming out, and no word on if they mention UHF. Because some people have free screened it, but I haven't heard anything.
Wheel of Fish.
But we'll talk a little bit about Tulsa and how it's influenced kind of your sense of humor. Is there anyone specific from Tulsa, or I guess just really comedians in general, that have influenced you as a comedian? Because you said Tulsa obviously influenced you. Yeah,
I mean, I think, everybody can influence you in a way with their I don't know how to say this. There's nobody that I really listen to a lot that is really anything like my style. You know what I mean? Like, I grew up watching Chappelle and Chris Rock and all of those people, but if you saw me and you saw them, it's totally different. It's almost like in music, like if someone said, well, I only listened to jazz growing up and I only like jazz, but I play metal. Mm-hmm. You'd be like, well, you play a different genre than what you grew up listening to. And I'm kind of like that too. The style that people might put me in, I probably don't watch a lot of. But the stuff that I really like, I sound nothing like that. So that's kind of interesting. And I think it's helpful too, because you don't want to be too influenced by someone where you kind of end up biting them a little bit.
Yeah, and I would say, like you even mentioned, influences kind of come and go, but when you first kind of considered yourself a comedian, was there anything that you kind of like modeled that after, or was it you were kind of blazing your own path even then?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just talked like myself, and I just did what I thought would be a joke. I mean, I think it was helpful that Roy, he kind of really hammered, premise, setup, punchline into us, where you don't just talk aimlessly. It's like, what's the punchline here?
Get to the point.
And yeah, so it's kind of like, it's good. It's like if you're going to learn to play basketball, someone should show you, this is a pass, this is a free throw, or this is a layup. This is how to dribble. You should know your basics, whether you end up, no matter what your style, develops into. So I was taught basics of comedy. So I know.
The fundamentals.
The fundamentals, yeah.
And we came and saw that show. What was it? On downtown Main Street. I forget who was
Vanguard.
Playing, yeah, that was really surprising. I mean, that was I didn't really know what to expect, but everybody on that was hilarious. And you said the guy had been on, and I can't.
Yeah, he's been on Conan. A couple times. Yeah, Brad Wenzel, and yeah, we were bringing him to town on a Sunday night, and I knew that would be a really cool show that probably wasn't going to have as many people as it should have. I think that room should have been completely packed.
Yeah.
Because it was an awesome show, top to bottom. I'm really glad you guys came out. Because that's the kind of thing that happens here sometimes that's just not getting enough attention.
Is it some of the bigger comedians, and definitely not my favorite, but the ones that we kind of know and have known, I mean, it seems like they're kind of more at the casinos and stuff like that. I guess it's mainly just because it's a higher paycheck, or I mean, is that the top venues for those kind of comedians now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it does kind of feel like there's certain comics that are like, well, they're like a cruise ship comic, and they're a casino comic, and they're a BOK Center comic, and it's almost like a genre, almost, like in music. But it's really just how many fans you have. But for certain styles, it's really only going to go so far. Like Bill Burr played the BOK Center, but Bill Burr appeals to a lot of people.
Sure.
And he does a style that's really not acceptable anymore. Like I was talking about this with someone the other day where it's like the reason why Bill Burr has, I mean, not taking anything away from him, but it's like he got to the top with a certain style, and they're not really letting anybody go up that ladder anymore. It's like they've kicked the ladder down. They're like, he can be up here and he can do these kind of jokes, but none of y'all can. Not at this level. So there's no real way to have the next Bill Burr while he's alive being Bill Burr.
And it also seems like exposure, I mean, we used to tune in on TV for like comedy shows, but now you can almost like, get on Instagram or like, or a different like YouTube or something. It just seems like the exposure, like you have more to choose from than maybe you ever have.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But just also, people's appeal is just, it's very specific and it's,
generational too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's hard to have that kind of appeal to everyone and to be able to make it. It's really not easy to make it in comedy. I mean, and not that it's easy to make it in anything, but like, in music, it's a little bit more possible to just have someone that just has a look and someone can write their songs for them and, help actually make it sound, whether they sing like that or not, they can make their voice sound like that in the studio with the effects and everything. But in comedy, it's sort of like if you're going to be on stage for an hour and a half at the BOK Center, like you've probably been doing comedy for a while to be able to stand up there and do that. I mean, we went and saw Bill, a month ago, and he did an hour and a half at the BOK Center, and if he hadn't had decades in comedy, he wouldn't be able. You couldn't take a 21-year-old and be like, they'd be exposed for what they are pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just him talking. I mean, there wasn't like a set behind him or anything to keep your attention other than just him, right? I mean, yeah, for an hour and a half. So we mentioned these kind of bigger venues, but if someone has never seen comedy in Tulsa, because we have a lot of new Tolsons that have been, coming here every day, what's really the best way to experience the real comedy scene, but also support the comedy community that's growing right now? What is the best way to kind of approach that?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I just to answer it in a more broad way, I think bigger than just comedy. I think Tulsa, I probably wouldn't like it as much as I do if I hadn't. I feel like certain people, they kind of unlock Tulsa. It's like they figure out where to go and what's what. They're like, if you go to Reds, it's like this. First Shop's like this. This is where the comedy club, this is where the music is. And they just kind of get a feel for like, these are the good places to eat, and they know how to do everything. But if you don't know any of that stuff, you're kind of stuck here going, well, I guess I'll go to the mall and walk around in a circle. Because you're like, I don't know what the fuck to do here.
That was fun in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what people did. And people that come here that have no idea what to do, they either do that or they go sit in a coffee shop. Because they're like, I don't know what to do but sit in a coffee shop. I know to go out to eat, but like where are the fun things happening? Like how do I, like, oh my God, I'm doing 5 comedy shows a week, but you have no idea where any of them are. So you don't know how to get to them. And unfortunately, we are a little bit underground in our approach. It's not that we've never been covered by, the newspaper or different, we had the Tulsa Voice and stuff like that. But I mean, it's not like you're going to turn on the radio and they're going to give you a rundown of, what local shows to go to and stuff like that. So you kind of got to figure it out for yourself. And Tulsa won't be as fun of a place as it can be until you figure out where all the stuff is happening. So I do what I can to get, the word out about what's going on to people. But you can kind of tell by, the turnout how much people were aware something was going on.
Yes.
And they're starting to, they've got the Tulsa Remote program and things like that. And they want to be able to tell those people that are moving here, thousands of people that are moving here, where things are happening. So they have a newsletter for them. And I'm able to get my shows in that newsletter of like things that they can check out. And they're starting to put on shows themselves that they're paying money for and getting put on, so they can say, hey, we're putting on entertainment here for all these people that are moving here. So I've been able to do some of those shows lately. But I'm still doing all my, I guess you could call them like underground shows. They're like kind of like underground like punk shows.
Nice.
But they're comedy, but it's basically the same thing. I mean, we're setting up somewhere at a time, and maybe I don't know, let's say a number, but maybe 800 people knew where it was and 100 people showed up. Yeah. But like there's a lot more people here than that.
Yeah.
How do we reach those next groups of people? But it feels like the people that were meant to be there are there. And that's such a weird thing to say, but it's like that's
if you know, you know.
Yeah, it's like if you were meant to be at this show, you're going to be at the show. It's like it's cosmic.
We are a small town in many ways, and it's kind of what you make of it. And so, when we get in this little kind of niche of certain people or whatever, I like that. I appreciate being able to go out to a bar or a show and run into people that I know and that I'm comfortable with. I've lived in other towns, where you are anonymous. And, so it's one of those things like, I don't want us to be the next Denver or the next Austin, because I really appreciate the small group that we have. And, so hopefully those like Tulsa Remote, because I work with those folks when I give tours with Tulsa Foundation for Architecture. And bringing some of those people in, it's just almost, I feel like a double-edged sword to the traditional Tulsa culture that I have enjoyed for many, many years, which is very much a small city culture versus, that we're trying to market to all 1 million people in the Tulsa metro area.
What about first-time comics? What advice do you have for those people to get started here in Tulsa?
Well, you really got to show up to an open mic and just, go through it and learn and get better. And I would say just ask questions, like ask people for their most honest feedback and try to find the people that will give it to you. and be receptive to it and like really listen. And sometimes it might be hard to take, because it might sting a little bit, I mean, or you might just be really good, but even then, you'll probably want some pointers. There'll be things that people can kind of help you with to kind of make you better than what you are.
Just be flexible. Don't kind of think that you got it the first time.
Yeah, and a lot of people fall into that, unfortunately, because if you do get, there's people that could get like 4 really big laughs, and they'll just be like, man, I fucking killed it, and they'll think they know everything already, and it's just sort of like, okay, but that was a 4-minute set at the Hunt Club. It's like, that's not, doing Kane's Ballroom for an hour. It's like, and there's people that will give you, it's like, yeah, maybe none of us have been on a late night show or, done a set at the BOK Center either, but we've been around longer and we've seen a lot of, what works and what doesn't.
Especially locally.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched, I've done, over 500 shows myself.
Whoa.
And I've watched more than that. So yeah. I know what a good local set looks like, and I know what a bad local set looks like, and I know what one looks like that's kind of in the middle almost. And you can pretty much tell exactly how new someone is. And people they almost don't really want to believe that, but it's like you could look at almost any comic and know if they've been doing it for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. You can just tell.
So, I mean, you can see, and you've also seen, the progress of Tulsa, but what do you see as the future of comedy in Tulsa?
I think it's just going to keep growing and growing. I mean, minus like having like a huge setback, but I think there's so much of us that are working at it. I mean, we ultimately need more people to produce shows and more people that can help get people started in comedy. Like that's what really, I always say, what the biggest difference between us and like an actual like punk scene is I'm actively trying to get people to start new punk bands that I can put on my shows.
Yeah.
Because, maybe in the punk scene, you can just have 3 bands and every show is those 3 bands. But in the comedy scene, we need new people. I can't have the same 5 comics every show over and over and over. So, you might know someone and you're like, they're really, really funny. They're not going to get up their first time and like just destroy, but you might see a potential in them. Like, this is a funny person and they could be good. Encourage them to try it out. If the person, there's been so many people, I mean, a ton of people, I mean, probably 50 people that I've given them their first set ever. Like, jumped them past the open mic. Yeah, and just put them on a showcase, hoping for the best, but also not being worried about it. There was a comic that told me, when I was in like my first year at Looney Bin, he offered me a guest spot on the show, and I was brand new, and I was like, oh man, I don't think I'm ready, and I don't think the club would want that. I was like, I don't think you understand. I'm like really new at this, and he was like, well, if it goes really great, then that's great. And he's like, if it goes bad, that's just, it makes us look even better. He was like, you really can't mess up our show unless you say something racist or horrible, but it's like, if you're just doing jokes and, they're not hitting that well, and it's just a 5-minute set, it's like, you're not going to kill the show. So that's kind of been my attitude. I've given a lot of people chances, and I'm willing to do that for the betterment of the growth of the scene. There's people that have got into local comedy, and because of them getting into local comedy, 600 more people know about Tulsa comedy. Maybe not that many people have probably gone to a show because of that person, but, if even only they bring 50 people to a show, like it's still in some way growth and awareness and things like that. And it keeps things moving. People are buying drinks, people are checking out the other comics. It's all a snowball effect, but you need that, that's what really keeps it growing.
You do shows that are music and comedy. So, I mean, it's kind of like a little bit of both. You can have music and comedy, not just, comedians the whole time. Or I guess you know better than me, but what you do kind of like combination shows and stuff like that brings certain people out that probably wouldn't ordinarily, I guess, or...
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good way to get seen, is to have that kind of cross over to be in front of a music audience full of people that have probably never gone to see comedy that'll see a comic. Mm-hmm. So those shows can be really good. There's times where I feel like I'm doing a lot of those shows, and there's kind of droughts where I'm not really doing a lot of music shows. It just it depends, I guess.
But you're still invested in the music scene, and I've seen you obviously in music videos for local artists. One being the Fire in Little Africa video, which you played the caricature of Mayor Bynum, B.T. Guynam, and there was a lot that happened with that, I guess, is the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, I think I've been in, maybe 15 or 16 music videos now, something like that. And I think,
well, you made 2 for this one, right? There were 2 different videos for the reparations music video.
Yes, I think that's now the biggest music video I've been in out of all of them.
Mm-hmm. Like the sitcom related one, or the one that you filmed. Did you film that at the same time, or did you have to go back and film an entire?
Well, what happened was, I think Steph Simon had told me many months before of the idea of you play the mayor, we throw you in the trunk and all of that, and I was
the black and white version.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I was super. Well, I actually didn't know it was going to be black and white. I was super excited about it, though, because I went and I got the orange color glasses. I didn't know it was going to be black and white. So I figured, and that was kind of one of the first things I thought was, I was like, well, people aren't going to see the color glasses, which is definitely it's GT. But also maybe then that's kind of better, and it's I thought maybe I don't know.
Well, you really did the interview that the mayor did, that one face that he made. I mean, it was like you perfected that one face that he was making when he was asked about obviously the centennial and reparations in general. And I remember seeing the original music video, and I didn't really find offense to it, but there were people out there of higher echelons, I guess you could say, that did find some type of kind of enough to not release it.
Well, I knew it was going to be big. I mean, as soon as I heard the idea and who was going to be involved, I knew it was kind of it was a bridge to different groups of people in the community, where it was sort of like, there's so many people in Tulsa, unfortunately, that don't know about Fire in Little Africa. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I was going to be able to connect a large number of Tolsons to Fire in Little Africa. So I think my involvement with it was going to be a connection for so many people. And I got so excited about it because of that, being able to merge these two worlds together. And I just knew it was going to be, amazing. I just knew it was going to be classic. Even before it happened, I was just like, when they pitched it to me, I was like, I am going to do everything I can. I'm going to show up and look exactly like the mayor. Like, I'm going to kill this. I was so excited about it. I had a friend do my, I went and got the suit. I got the glasses off Amazon. I had my friend do my hair and makeup every day. So I think we did 4 days of shooting on the original one, the black and white one. Mm-hmm. And every day, I got up and got the suit, had the hair and makeup done. I became, the mayor, and we shot different, we shot the car scene where I'm driving a stick, even though I'd never drove a stick in my life. And we're actually on a busy street on 11th Street. We actually put the camera on the hood of the car, and it's kind of scary, but we did it. So there was the car scene day. There was the day where we're all out in front of the federal building, which I guess someone had called it in like it was like a threat, because there were so many people out front of it, and they all came down and treated it like a threat situation. Those were all different days of filming, so a lot went into it. And then I was on Greenwood one day, and my friend casually brought it up, like we were talking about the video, and he was like, it's not coming out, right? And I was like, what? And he's like, oh, you didn't hear? It's like they squashed it. And I was like, what? It was like, no one told me. All I'd heard was that it was moved back. I think it was moved back like 2 different times, but I never knew that that's what was going on. But apparently lawyers at the parent label. So there's Motown, which is a subsidiary of Universal. Yeah. And apparently one story I heard was that the lawyers looked at it and thought it was it could be perceived as like a threat on the mayor.
Yeah.
So that was why it wasn't going to be able to come out. But they thought that if they made some significant changes to it, they could get it out. So they even submitted a version of it where my face was blurred the entire time, and just submitted that, and it came back rejected with no notes, no like, you need to do this too, or like it's almost there. It was just like, no. Whoa. And that's when they were really discouraged, and it was just like, but there was other stuff too that I heard. I mean, apparently the line about GT, they'd heard it like
in the first verse, yeah.
Yeah, they heard it like the day or two before the album was going to come out, and they were trying to get it taken off the album at like 0 hour. Oh. And then finally they were telling them, they were like, you're not going to make your release date trying to change it right now. Like, it has to come out like this, or you have to push the album back. And that was the only reason the line stayed on it. Like, it almost kind of like flew under the radar. If they had heard it before, when there was time to get it taken off, it would have been taken off. And so the lyric book came out, and it's the only line not in the lyric book. You know? So there is an awareness at the top where that was, you guys can't do this.
Well, it's also, you know, what we do here, Tulsa history, and parts that, you know, haven't been told. And it's good to hear from the first person perspective, because again, I remember seeing the music video, but I mean, it's almost impossible to find now unless you kind of have the link or whatever, right? I mean,
yeah, I think it's finally out now on YouTube. I mean, way after the fact. I mean,
yeah.
It needed to come out when it was back in May or whatever, you know, and it just, yeah, it's really sad that that censorship was able to happen, because they were told, you know, when they originally were presented the project, their first question was like, someone stood up and was like, can we say what we want? Can we do what we want?
Yeah.
And then someone at the label or whatever was like, yeah, you guys have complete freedom. You do what you want. You say what you want. We're not suppressing anything. And they said, cool. And then, you know, that video,
famous
obviously,
last words.
Yeah. I mean, they even apparently they told them about the concept of the video. They didn't just go shoot it. They were like, this is what we're doing. But it wasn't until they
had to get
saw
funded,
it.
right? I mean, it got to a certain point where it should have just been, I mean, it was unexplainable that it got to that point, you know, that it shouldn't have been released, like you said, on the day. But, you know, I mean, it is a way of bringing more awareness, although the sitcom version was that filmed at the same time? Or was that kind of like, we still have to get something out, or?
Yeah, what happened was, I think I ran into the artist, St. Dominic, at the Greenwood Gallery. I think it was they did a show, and it was an art show, and it had photos from the original video shoot on the wall for sale. So it had my headshot was one of them. Mine with Dr. View, where I'm in the handcuffs, that was one of them. And Dom showed up to that art show, and I was there, and he was like, hey, on this date, I think it was like August 11th, you know, music video shoot you down. And I was like, yeah, 100%. And I didn't even realize that it was a reshoot of Reparations. I thought it was like his next song, next project. And then I was actually talking to Steph about something entirely different. And I was like, yeah, I got this shoot like a couple of days from now with Dom. Do you know what it is? Like, I almost felt like Dom asking him. And Dom is like kind of, he doesn't give you very much information. You know, he's very like man of few words. Yeah, he's like, August 11th, you gonna be there? You down? You know, it's like, yes, and that's
of course. Yeah,
that's it. Say yes. You know, you don't sit there and ask 10 questions about it.
Who all else was in that? Because there's, I mean, obviously it introduces like 10 different people, or like, I mean, are those all their friend, or those friends of yours, or I mean, not everyone looked familiar in the video.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you about that. So Steph was laughing, and he was like, it's Reparations, bro. And I was like, what? I was like, you know, we're reshooting it, but I had no idea how different the concept would be. Like, I didn't know we were going to do like a parody, right? And so Dom was, he hit me up, and he was like, hey, you know, bring, you know, 10 people or whatever. Bring 10 of your friends. And so I messaged people that I thought would be like super down to be in a St. Dominic music video. And then it was like the day before, I think, and he hit me up, and he was like, all right, give me the list of everyone you invited. And I sent it to him, and this is so funny, but he was like, no black people. Like when he looked at the list, I had, it was like Damian Shade on there and Mike D and a bunch of people, and he was like, these people are black.
And this is a black guy that said this.
Correct? Yeah.
St. Dominic's
he was like, that's not what we're doing. Mm-hmm. He's like, that's when I first had an idea of what the concept was going to be, and it's like the day before. Mm-hmm. So we barely had enough people to do it. I mean, it was just barely. I mean, because it was a Tuesday during the day and a lot of people work. And I think some people I'm always so excited to do music videos, but other people are kind of like, oh, I'm going to be on camera. What is it? They
want to know as much as possible before getting started.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell them that much. And I think what I described, honestly, to most of the people that were in it was wildly different than what it ended up being. Like, I just thought it was going to be like a house party type scene. I mean, it really is different than that. But,
it's kind of Full House-ish in a sense. I mean, I think it's similar in that nature. For those that haven't seen it, of course, but...
Well, it's funny you say that because we weren't actually playing the song at the video shoot. We were playing the Full House theme song.
Okay.
And also other songs that were from that era of sitcom, because that was the vibe and the theme of it. So the concept was basically like, you tell us we can't do our vision. You won't let us do what we want to do. So here you go. You want a whitewash music video. Mm-hmm. Here it is. So we were basically just going to, piss in their cereal, and that's talking to Dom about it later, it's kind of funny because he did there was a thing out at this warehouse where they got together to discuss the music video, kind of like what we're doing now, where Dom got to speak to everybody, and it's just like, yeah, there's been so many people that criticized that video, and it was our friends too, like I got a message from someone that was like telling me that I shouldn't have done that video, and some of the people's attitude about it was almost like they thought that we all got together, like me and all these white people, and went and made this video and put it out ourselves. It was like, no, Dom was there and was directing all of us. We just did exactly what we were told to do. And I wouldn't have done anything in it that I wasn't told to do by him. So the whole video there was a purpose, there was a reason for why it came out, there's a reason why it looks like the way it does, and it was a fuck you. And I think there were some people that really got that and some people that didn't, and you could tell from the YouTube comments. And I think there are some people, though, that they got it. They understood what we were doing, but it still pissed them off because they wanted that original video. They were like, oh, fuck this. But it was like, we couldn't do the original video.
Yeah.
And this was
just dealing with even more issues. I mean, a lot of those people that you mentioned are still performing. I mean, they were at last weekend at Dreamland Fest, which was sponsored by Holberton, correct? Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, Clayton, he's one of the Holberton class students, so over there. And I didn't get a chance to make it out. I was super busy this weekend. But how did the Dreamland Fest go last weekend?
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was awesome. It was kind of like a remix of the World Culture Music Festival that's been going on for 6 years. I think this was the 7th year, but they've got more money in it now with these sponsorships and stuff like that coming in from Kaiser and Tulsa Remote and Holberton or whatever, and so they were able to bring in bigger headliners, I think, than they had in past years. I believe
you did I've seen the photos, but you did a set on one of the nights, or was it multiple nights? Or
yeah, so the Thursday before, so Friday was the official first night, but Thursday was like the kind of like a pre-show kickoff night that I hosted at Mercury Lounge. That had Dial Tone on it, who was an artist from Fire in Little Africa, and he was on that, and so that was kind of like the night before the fest, unofficial night one. And then so Friday I got to host the outdoor main stage it was supposed to be from like 4:30 to, 4:30 to 11, but we started late. So I think it ran from like 6 p.m. to 12:45. So I got to host that, and that was just, that was damn near 8 hours of hosting. So it was like a full day's work introducing people. But yeah, that was really cool. And then Sunday night I hosted they marketed it as like the after party to the Guthrie Green show, and it was at Sound Pony, and that was from 9 until close, but we wrapped it up at like 1 a.m. Which was just all rappers, and was rappers from, some of them were from Oklahoma City, some were from Arkansas, some local, and it was inside stage and outside stage at Sound Pony, and I hosted both of them.
Yeah,
so I was running back and forth. Yeah.
That.
So it was like I was always trying to be aware of like who was about to wrap up inside to make sure you get another person on inside, but also like what's going on outside, make sure that person, is good, and see when they're wrapping up. So you're trying to keep someone constantly on each stage, and it was one of the most chaotic shows I've ever hosted. I don't think I've ever hosted by myself 2 different stages at the same time.
Well, I was going to say, the Blue Whale Comedy Fest, there's multiple stages, but I guess you were kind of more in one location rather than having to really jump around, or...
Yeah, I mean, it's...
And that was just, when was that, August, or...
Yeah, kind of like later August. Okay. Yeah, I mean, they might have like a simultaneous show like that, but they wouldn't have the same host. So you're just, you're where you are.
But you've been doing that since how long, I guess?
So in my first year, in my first year of comedy, they were in their second year of the festival, and I had kind of heard about it a little bit, but I didn't really know what it was or that I needed to apply and stuff like that. So I wanted to go to the shows, and showing up at them, the owner of the comedy parlor was like, "Bro, you want to guest spot on this?" And that was really cool to be offered that. Next year I applied and got in. There were years in the past where it was a lot harder to get into it, where they were like, "We're only taking this many comics, and we're sorry, we don't have room for anybody else after that." And they've really opened it up to accepting more, to try to find a way to kind of like, let's kind of try to get everybody on stage. Well, obviously we can't have everybody, but it's nice to just get everybody on at Sound Pony.
Quicker.
If they're a local comic, well, I mean, just give everybody a spot. Just find a spot for everybody, just to help with the inclusion. But realizing that I was kind of taking up a spot every year, where there were some people that were newer than me, that maybe had less, I hate to use the word, but like less clout, that probably weren't going to be able to get on because of me, that I sat out a year to give somebody else that spot, which was just like, my idea of like, I'll do this. It's just like, it's this, I do a lot of shows, and it's not a big deal, but
then applauded as a nice guy.
The worst thing happened was the pandemic hit next year, and then they didn't even bring it back the year after that. So it was like my 1 year of sitting out, a planned 1 year, ended up being 3 years I was out. And then so coming back this year, they hit me up to do they were going to do a show at the Lowdown, the Duet Jazz Club, is kind of a like, let's do the show to announce to everyone that the Blue Whale Comedy Festival is coming back. And I was kind of feeling like, I don't know, sometimes like doing stand-up, some nights you just feel like, you're like, man, I don't know if I'm going to have it tonight. I just don't know how the set is going to go. Because I showed up and they had me on first, and I was just like, I wasn't really feeling great, but I went up there, and I loved my set. I thought it went fantastic. As soon as I went up there and the first joke went out and did really well, I was like, oh yeah, this is great.
Sometimes
sometimes it's like, it's probably like batting practice. It's like that first one goes out over the fence, and you're like, well, I didn't feel like I had it, but I have it, And then so after that, I got off stage, and the guy that is like the admin of the festival came up to me, and my confidence was just so high. I was like, bro, like I hadn't even applied yet at Blue Whale, but I was like, let me host these shows, and I just asked him for it, and he was like, done. I mean, it was like a 2-second conversation. And then I ended up getting added to the staff through word of mouth from one of the other comics that was just like, Evan should be in here, in the meetings and stuff like that. So I got put on the staff kind of late. So I didn't really I organized 2 of the local shows, pretty much just like everybody was already accepted to the festival that was at my disposal, but I kind of decided on the order and what night they'd be on.
Gotcha. Scheduling.
Yeah. Just kind of, and it's funny because I have kind of a different attitude towards comedy show lineups based on booking for years than I did when I first started. So when I first started in local comedy, a show order was always basically like the local headliner was whoever's been doing comedy the longest. It's like respect. It's like this person's been doing it 8 years. They go last. The newest person goes up first. It's like you're new, you're first. But then having done comedy booking for a couple of years, I kind of finally figured out that that's not necessarily always the best show lineup, because a lot of times, you know, people will leave before the headliner even gets on, so they don't even see your top gun, you know. So I realized, you know, kind of putting them like third or fourth a lot of times when the room's at its most full, they've seen a couple of people, you know, they're a little bit loosened up, and then you give them the best person, and then if they hang out through, you know, 3 or 4 more comics, and the one at the end isn't quite as good as that one, like it really doesn't matter, you know. And then a lot of times you really have to give them someone really good up front, you know. Like if the first couple comics are brand new, people will literally just be like, man, this isn't that great, I'm just going to take off. Like people will just walk. But if you give your second best comic right up front, and then they see a couple that are kind of like, I don't know how much I like that one, but let's stick around and see if they got another one like that first one. You know, right away they're like, damn, this show's legit. You know, if you give them something right away. Same thing with like a comedy set. You give them like your second best joke right off the bat, and then put your best one, you know, at the end. And the only reason I don't always put my best comic at the very end of the show is just because a lot of times there's less people there by the end if you're booking a long enough show. So the local shows were going to be really long, and so I put some of the best people, like I put some of the best comics, like comic one, and when they got the email, they were like, fuck, why am I first? Like, did they hate my tape that much? You know, and they actually, two of them hit me up about it. Like both, I think the first comics hit me up and they were like, damn, like, what do you think I did wrong? You know, and I was like, hey, I put you first, you know, because I think you're really good, you know.
Different strategy than
just,
what anyone's used to.
Yeah, so it's going to take time to kind of, I don't want to say like relearn, but for people to kind of accept that there's other ways to set up a show, you know. And I still see it in music all the time too. I mean, you could look at a lot of shows, not saying names, but it's like a lot of people aren't there by the time your headliner's on stage because they left, you know. So it's like, did you really want to put your best person at 1 a.m?
And another thing, you also do open mic, so that's kind of just like you don't have to schedule any. I mean, just people come up, and how long do they get a chance to do I mean, is it like a 5-minute set or something like that for the open mic comedy nights?
There's a couple good open mics. There's one at Hunt Club, one at Starlight, one at Fur Shop, and I think it can depend on how many signups they get. At least that's how it was in the past at some places like Fur Shop, where it was like, hey, we had 25 people that want to go up. We don't want to be here all night. So everybody's going to do 3 minutes and we'll get out of here at a reasonable time. But it's like if only like 14 people, 15 people showed up, it's like, hey, well, everybody could do 5, you know, and it's not going to be an insanely long show. Because if they give everybody 5 and you have like 25 people, by the time it gets to the end, you know, that person's set is kind of screwed. You know, nobody's going to be there by then.
Do you usually, I mean, let's say that you had a set, not an open mic, but if you had a set, do you write everything down before you go up there, or do jokes kind of come to you? I mean, have you even come up with jokes on the spot, or what's your go-to strategy, I guess?
I usually do them like, I kind of think of it as like myself as like a band.
Okay.
You know, where jokes are just like song titles. You know, like you have, you know, the joke is called Grocery Store, and I should know what the grocery store joke is. You know, I know the bridge and the hook.
So it's a little different every time. I mean, you may not use the exact like wording or something. You may, I mean, you know what the punchline is, but the way to get there may change a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of them it just, yeah. And I think a comedy set list looks a lot like a band set list. Like if you saw a Rolling Stones set list, it's like Start Me Up and, Wild Horses and all Brown Sugar. And a comic set list just looks different. It's like bathroom, dog food, boner. And it's like, it's the same thing. Like they know those fucking songs. Like and they can do them. And yeah, the words might not be exact, but that really depends on the comic. There's comics that, I've opened up for at Looney Bin. Like when Looney Bin hires you to do a week, you do Wednesday through Saturday.
Oh,
and
okay.
so you're opening
every
for
night.
a touring comic. And some of them can do their set like practically word for word with the same, hand gestures, the same smile, the same
robotic
walk. Yeah, they can do it like exact, and it works.
It works for them.
Yeah. And there's other comics where it's like it's that bit, but it's like, oh, they didn't say this part. They didn't say this part. They added this part. And it's just like, it's still the same song, but they're just kind of like, oh, that's the 7-minute version. And this is like a 5-minute version, and it's just, they might say, and then he goes down the hallway or they might say, I'm trying to think of a different way to say that. And then so he walked around the corner. It's like it said the same thing, but it was like it's different words, different cadence, but you basically know the gist of what the bit is.
And, we mentioned Looney Bin multiple times, and we mentioned that story opened in 2007 and was, in the story it mentioned only official comedy club. But, I mean, I was playing music at that time, and I remember a whole lot of different venues. But what I remember most about Tulsa is that it was a complete different scene. We were playing, and you mentioned, you were a metalhead in the past, which intrigued me because, I used to play in a hardcore band, and the Pink Eye, we used to play that like once a week. And I just remember Tulsa, in my concept of what it was at the time, just being completely different. But there was obviously other venues that could have been comedy. They just wouldn't have been ideal for it, I guess. Or, what other venues do you remember? Because we mentioned this off the podcast, but the Pink Eye, I remember playing in the Kendall Whittier district when, nothing was over there except for Circle Cinema, and it was boarded up on the front of it and everything. Yeah. But I remember playing in that, it's like a video store now or something, but it has like, gates on the windows and everything, but I just remember playing all kinds of just different, like punk, not really punk rock, but it was kind of like hardcore / emo kind of stuff. But you mentioned a few other venues that you used to go to, and this would have been prior to the comedy kind of career, correct?
Yeah. Let me think here. So I think I mentioned, going to hardcore shows at Rudy's house.
Yeah, and
for example, there was that church at Owen Park. Mm-hmm. And when I started in stand up, like we had more shows that were not downtown. We had a show at where was it? It's called Tommy's Bar.
What, you were in a band too?
Oh no, just doing stand up.
Okay,
but stand up in 2015, it was like there was a show at Tommy's Bar, and it was at Sheridan and Admiral, and it was just like maybe 8 to 10 people were there, and that was kind of like that was. And then we did shows at the Shrine and Lot 6, and some of the shows would have a lot of people, and then other ones would have hardly anybody. So it would just, but you just had to. I think there's a lot of comics now that expect there to be bigger crowds when they come to shows. Like they're like a little bit spoiled. Like they show up and there's like 50 people and they're like, oh hell yeah, but like, or like even like 30 and they're just like, it's okay. And it's like,
even though they didn't have anything to do with bringing anybody, they just expect it to be that way, right?
Yeah, and even just kind of not realizing that a lot of times, we perform for only the comics, or we perform for, 6 audience members. There was a show I did at Comedy Parlor for 2 people, and Comedy Parlor sometimes had packed shows too. It's one of my favorite venues, but performing in front of very few people was definitely a feature of comedy when I got started, and I think there's so many better shows today with more people, and I think it's probably the same thing in the music scene too.
Yeah, I would say so. it definitely seems like, even friends that I know that are in a band or in more than one band, and they're playing all the time, and it just seems like there's more opportunities to play, more places to play, versus when we talk about, those mid-2000s when, I don't think even Tulsa was really like Tulsa at that point. Everybody kind of had a different idea of what Tulsa was going to be. If you haven't seen the Oil Capital Underground documentary,
it's a great documentary.
It's just amazing how they talk about the punk scene, which was honestly huge at the time, and in venues like Icon and Blue Grotto, and just so many more. That documentary is like 2 hours long, and they really do not miss anything. So if you have not seen that, check that out. But this is one that I want to ask probably every guest, because I remember it very vividly. D-Fest. Did you go to those when they occurred, or
No, but I didn't actually go, but I know exactly what it is. But
Yeah.
something you did say that reminded me. So when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, I got to see Brother Inferior live, and now I'm friends with Chad Malone, the singer,
Nice.
and he was in Senior Fellows and a lot of other cool bands like Larkin and stuff like that. And my sister was actually running punk house shows back then, the late 90s, early 2000s. It was called the Phoenix House. And a lot of bands like Constant Peril did their first show there. And there were touring bands there all the time. And I got to see Hickey, which was a touring punk band from that era that used to play Tulsa a lot. And and I don't know if you ever met Cash Wolf before.
I remember the name, yeah.
Cash was in a band called Ironborn and some other bands. And he was kind of one of my first friends when I started. Really, he was my first friend when I started coming back out into the Tulsa scene and stuff like that, and introduced me around. And I eventually got to do comedy opening up for his band and other hardcore bands. So I got to do comedy on a lot of hardcore shows in my first year.
Nice.
Got to play, the Conservatory. It's called 89th Street Collective in Oklahoma City.
In Oklahoma City, yeah. And that kind of brings us to what other than Tulsa, what other cities nearby are kind of comedy places you like to go to?
Well, Fayetteville is actually a little bit of kind of a mirror of Tulsa in a lot of ways.
Okay. That's where my sister lives, Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, they have a ton of comics, shows. They have all of that. So it's that was always kind of like a sister city for us. I've done lots of Fayetteville shows. I brought a lot of Fayetteville comics to Tulsa. In Oklahoma City too, even though it's only, an hour and a half to 2 hours away, it's like they have their own version of all the Tulsa comics. They have like the Oklahoma City comic version. They have like mirrors of like our shows up there.
They have their own loony bin there, correct?
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
So
There's like a few different of those across this general region, correct?
Yeah, there's one in Little Rock, one in Wichita, one in
Okay.
OKC, and one in Tulsa. And so we'd bring OKC comics here, and they'd bring us up there. And the scenes were pretty similar, OKC, Fayetteville, and Tulsa. There's some minor differences and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you could probably look closely at the numbers and be like, oh, well, this place technically has 5 more shows or whatever. But they're roughly like pretty active, cities that do similar stuff. They have, comedy contests and local shows and club shows and they have people that have been doing it for years and years that are kind of their comedy scene elders. And we have ours here, kind of like this. They're like the same people.
So I guess kind of now talking about all these different scenes and vibes, I guess, what do you think makes Tulsa, the scene in Tulsa, whether it be music, comedy, entertainment, what makes Tulsa unique? You've been here longer than I have, of course. I grew up about an hour away, but I visited Tulsa all the time. So to me, it was kind of a different place. But for someone that's been here, for this long, what do you think makes Tulsa unique versus Northwest Arkansas or Oklahoma City or any other place like that?
I think we have an energy here and a togetherness and a very Tulsa, like the same thing as I think, you go into somebody's house and then you go in another person's house and those two houses just have different energies and vibes, I don't think this is your house. Or
I live back there, but yeah, this
Okay.
is kind of my house.
But this is like, this compares to my house, but also it doesn't feel like my house.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, the blinds are the same.
The doors are the same.
The air conditioner,
is the same. But other than that, I don't have a Canes poster.
Not yet. He's working on it.
I don't have a box of Magic Spoon cereal.
When's your birthday, by the way? I need to write that down.
May 17th. I'm a Taurus. So, yeah, it's like, I think that's what it is. It's like Tulsa's got a feel to it, similar to like the house metaphor. And I think it's a good energy. And I think it comes from genuinely like how many good people are here. Like there are bad people here, but it's like they've been the minority, I think. I think overall it's usually like a really good vibe. I mean, even going to like Dreamland, it's like you kind of feel that good energy. It's like you don't feel like anybody here's like a fight is even possible. You know, it's like, you're just out here. You can get food, you could get drinks. Largely, like everybody's either your friend or they would want to be your friend. Like that's the vibe. Like everybody kind of has this like, oh, you're here too. Like you're cool.
Yeah.
You know, people don't really look at you like, who the fuck are you? It's not that kind of city.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, and this is like another Tulsa truth, is you could look up anybody that was at Dreamland on social media and it'll be like 34 mutual friends. And that's what it is. It's like their aunt is someone that used to cut your sister's hair. And like that's Tulsa. It's a small town. So it's like you can't bring that kind of negative energy to people because you're more connected to everyone than you think, or you should know that. That's one thing you should know about Tulsa is like you don't bump into someone and tell them to go eat shit because chances are that person went to school with your best friend, and like everyone, they'll find out where you live. Like everybody knows each other somehow. So there's accountability to how you act. If you try to just, take someone home from the bar and then be shitty and tell them to get the fuck out and ghost them. It's like, okay, you can do that, but the word's going to get out about you because everybody knows everyone. Yeah. And it's pretty soon you'll have a bad reputation and then you got to move to Colorado.
Later.
And that happens a lot. I mean, honestly, like a lot
Colorado's not bad, but we don't want our best friends there, We'd rather have them here, but yeah.
A lot of the moves are related to people being shitty. They have to get away for a while.
I mean, we could go on a list of that, but we're glad to have everyone that's still around here. But like you were saying, I mean, yeah, it's easy to get known for good or bad things pretty quickly, and I think that's why the likes, when you do the likes and everything, people post that, and people are just intrigued by like, who is this guy? Kind of one of those things.
One thing I do like about it is I think it's possibly like historically weird that it's, like anything that you do, you can probably figure has been done or is happening somewhere else. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, I challenge anyone to find anyone anywhere that has this going on that to this degree where it's like almost it's been going on for years and it's pretty much my entire social media. It's like it's rare that I don't say anything other. Like I have a Twitter that I've never tweeted on. I have an Instagram. I've never commented on Instagram posts in the history of Instagram ever. I have 20 some posts in 7 or 8 years, and Facebook. I haven't made a Facebook post since 2019.
Is the dog? That's still your dog? I mean, that's...
No, it's not even my dog.
It's not even your dog, okay.
This is a dog picture I found when I registered Facebook. I've never even had...
That dog's definitely probably not alive anymore.
No, definitely not. And I've never even had a new profile picture. Like, it's the only profile picture I've ever had. So I think I just like the idea of anything that could be historically weird and different and unique. Like, I think... leaning into something that's unique, no matter what it is, like just do something that's weird. Like it does kind of make people think, it's like, what the fuck?
And that's Tulsa in a sense.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to be normal. Mm-hmm. I could definitely post about little jokes about anything or just like, hey, what's the deal with the new Andolini slice? But like, that's not, my social media.
Well, and that's what I mean when we mentioned all those kind of Tulsa Hall of Famers. It was kind of like they kind of blazed their own trail too. It was like they weren't really like anyone specific, I mean, and I think you're going to be on that list one of these days, maybe when they do an update on this podcast in the future. So we're going to go into the speed round of questionings to finish things off here, and this is mostly Tulsa specific, but it's important to mention he's not seen these questions, and he's going in fresh. 8 questions. We didn't have a time limit until just recently. So top 3 favorite venues, no specific order, could be opened or closed in Tulsa.
I'd say the Yeti closed.
Yeah.
The Vanguard
Open.
Yes.
The Comedy Parlor closed.
Yeah, I do remember that.
2 closed, 1 open.
Next hot topic here. What do you think of the Davenport Lofts building, especially as a sound pony goer?
Bro.
Do not throw eggs.
Do not throw anything at it.
I hate it.
Everyone does.
Are you kidding me?
And speaking of the Yeti, same kind of thing. When you could go out back and you had just this fantastic view of the Tulsa skyline, and then you had, it was so close and intimate, and now you're, facing this wall of, $850,000 condos that we all know are going to sit empty for a while.
Yeah.
That's totally, no, and, then you mentioned the Vanguard. So, you used to, from the Vanguard, be able to look up Main Street and see the Cain's Ballroom sign. Yeah, thanks, Davenport Lofts.
Changed.
I hate that fucking place.
Yeah, it's like 5 or 6 people, I think if it was
So
like a
out
small
of
group of
character
people
for the neighborhood
that were involved, were
horrible.
responsible for taking something away from, 10,000 people.
Yes.
And something where, marriages came from that, many, many relationships, friendships. I mean, people went in there with no friends and left with a huge friend group, and we're still in a rebuilding mode in Tulsa where we don't have anything to replace the Yeti yet because it was like the perfect storm. You know what it was? It was the convergence of everything where it's like we had the perfect feeder system of new people into it, which was using Cain's Ballroom, which just brought a bunch of people down there, and then they would kind of be right there because it's next door, and they would be like, "Oh, I'm either going to go to this when I'm 21, or I'm going to just start going there. If I'm 25, they're like, what's going on over here?" So it was like, we have other spots around town, but we have no way of getting that kind of like mass walk-up traffic. So Cain's was bringing Cain's is booking alternative rock shows, rap shows, metal shows, and then every type of genre of human being is seeing the Yeti.
Yes.
Because they're right there to take a peek at it. So we were kind of that was kind of like a recruiting tool into what we had going on.
Right.
We don't have anything else like that. So when you'd go down there on a Friday or Saturday, there'd be 10 food trucks, which is all, they're making their money from that too. But the only reason they did it was because the Yeti was huge, Sound Pony was huge, Inner Circle Vodka Bar was huge.
Yes.
And Cain's would be huge. There'd be thousands upon thousands of Tolsons. And it was like, if you think that's anywhere else since that closed, it's not. We don't have anything that big to replace it. And 5 or 6 people were responsible for killing that because of greed.
Yes.
It was greed.
Wow, sorry. This isn't a timed
this is the speed question,
round,
but we want to get everything out. So on karaoke, question 3, on karaoke night, what is your go-to track?
Oh, I'm kind of...
Because I saw you at karaoke not too long ago.
Yeah, I like, I'm kind of a Bruce Springsteen or John Cougar Mellencamp.
Oh, nice.
Billy Joel, Elton John. I'm kind
Classics.
of in the old, Queen. Yeah, just in that range. But sometimes I'll do, Rihanna featuring Eminem.
Sweet. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Well, I know a lot of people asking this one. Have you taught or do you plan on teaching any dance classes in the future?
Ooh man. Oh, I think if you just watched me, people always
you just watch the reel over and over and over, then you can get it down, right?
People tell me that my secret is I don't dance to the beat, I dance to the lyrics. That's the secret.
That sounds good.
I like that.
Yeah, I need to try that next time. And then-
Whatever the lyrics are saying, that's what you do.
Okay. I'm writing it down. Give me a second. Give me a second.
By
But
Evan. Nice.
Tulsa, question 5. Tulsa is known for having many statues, Driller, Praying Hands, many more. But if you could commission a statue to be built in town, what would it be of?
Oh my gosh, that is. Oh man,
It's a tough one. I
Yeah,
know. It's,
can we skip that question?
You'll have to come. Yeah, we'll
enough.
skip 5 for now. Favorite Tulsa event or festival as an attendee, non-comedy related? Like, what do you just like to go out and? I mean, I know it might have comedy aspects to it, but what festivals or event do you like to just go out and enjoy?
I love local shows. I think just local bands is probably like my favorite thing to go do is local bands.
So any night, basically.
Yeah,
not any specific.
I'm not big on festivals, actually.
I gotcha.
Like I totally get them, like I understand, but it's just such a gigantic,
Lots of
thing of it's like
not
so
as
I'm gonna
cool.
watch 90 bands for 3 days and sleep in the woods
right,
without
right.
water. I'm like I'm not
Yeah.
on enough drugs for that.
Well, question 7. If you had to explain Tulsa in one word, what would that be?
I think Tulsa people are extremely kind. I feel like I often think about like the country in terms of like video game levels. And Tulsa has got to be like the easy level in terms of like making friends.
Yeah,
and finding things to do because people are so warm
Yes.
and welcoming.
Indeed.
It's a kind of a hold the door for you town, and like you need some help, people will give it to you and stuff like that. It's like you don't get that same thing in the big city. If you're struggling with Tulsa, don't move to Chicago.
Right.
If you've absolutely
Yes.
mastered
Good testing
Tulsa
grounds.
and you're bored, move go to a bigger city. But I think Tulsa's easy level for everything.
Okay. So, in your opinion, what would Tulsa be better without?
Oh man.
And we already mentioned Davenport Law, so you can't,
I
can't
can't
say
go back
that
to
one
that.
again. But
Probably the police.
yeah.
We just spend so much money, and they
Yeah.
just show up late and then tell you to file it yourself online, and then you don't hear anything back. It's like they're just driving around giving tickets for and it's like I think the bad things that are happening anyway.
Well, you got to
Indeed.
act.
They're not preventing a lot of it.
Oh, don't get me
You
started.
got to act like you're an Uber driver, like him. You just have the neon light on your front.
Right.
dash.
Oh, yeah. No, even at that, man. I had a recent negative experience with a volatile police officer that, yes, I'm obviously no threat. I don't know why he was coming up on me like he was going to do something. Yeah.
Well,
Fuck
this
that
is
shit.
the last question. Why was this the best podcast you've been on? No, I'm just kidding. Thanks for coming on. We're glad to have you as a guest. And before we finish up, where can we follow you online?
Evan B. Hughes on Instagram, Evan Hugs on Twitter, Evan Hughes on Facebook. Not really on TikTok.
Okay. Yeah. And then what upcoming events would we say in the next few weeks are we looking out for?
Let's see. I'm about to go out of town for a week, but when I'll be back, I think I got October 6th at the Vanguard, October 15th at the Lowdown, the Duet Jazz Club. I'm opening for someone big.
Okay. That will do it for this edition of the Tulsa Times podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McNicholas, joined with...
I'm John Beasley.
And Evan Hughes. If you have any thoughts, reach out. Social media, Tulsa Pass, tulsapass.com. I want to thank Jimmy, our audio engineer, our guest, again, Evan Hughes, and our listeners who've been spreading the word about this podcast. We'll have another episode for you soon. A quick reminder, you can also find us anywhere you get your podcast. Just search Tulsa Times Podcast. You'll see the episodes listed there. You can listen to any of them, all 5. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and listen to the past episodes to stay up to date with the newest. Thanks for listening again for this edition of the Tulsa Times podcast.